Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Future of BizTech. I'm your host, JC Granger, and I have another fantastic guest with us on the show today. And listen, if you end up loving this episode, please show your love and appreciation by following the podcast wherever you're listening. Be sure to give it a 5-star review, preferably with some nice comments. That always helps, because that is how other techies like you and I find cool podcasts like this. So today, I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing the founder and CEO of Forma.ai, Nabeil Alazzam. Nabeil, thank you so much for being on the show. Tell the audience a little bit about Forma and what about yourself and what do you guys do?
Absolute pleasure to be here today, JC. I'm glad we have the opportunity to chat. Forma.ai is a platform that helps large organizations better motivate and manage sales compensation, better motivate their reps and manage sales compensation. And the fact that 15 million people in the US are on a variable compensation plan means that this is a big industry and it's a big problem that needs to be tackled.
Well, and I agree. Here's the thing. So I'm a born and bred sales guy. I don't know if it was natural or what, but I ended up getting into sales a lot out of college. And I'll tell you, when I got the opportunity to interview you, I jumped at it because I haven't interviewed anyone who has a sales compensation SaaS company. And this is a really big deal for me just because, I've got years and years of pain and struggle and stuff with these compensation plans. And so I really want to see how technology has helped not only to organize it, but I'm sure it helps to get even more creative, right? Because if you have an organizational platform, you can come up with cooler ideas that are tracked, right? I always found that there was always so many errors in payouts because things were either complicated and they didn't have a way to do it right. So let's hear a little bit about that. What is it like to use your software? And is it for giant companies? Is it for small mom and pops, everyone in between? Let's start there.
So, you touched on something that's really, really important. The fact is if you're in an organization and you are paid a fixed salary, maybe an annual bonus, you would never question your pay stub at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But in sales, there's it's the expectation that you should double check your commissions to make sure they're right, and the fact that we get it wrong is kind of unacceptable. But I would say that's part of the problem. Like, to me, that is table stakes. It's not acceptable that we are mispaying, our employees and some of the key individuals in the organization that are driving the growth. So that's the table stakes part of the problem. But going back to my background, I worked as a management consultant that's focused on sales and marketing strategy. And we would go into these large enterprise organizations, whether it's the Pfizers or the Tevas or, large tech companies across the board. Every time you go in to do, to these organizations, you're supporting their design process and you're helping them optimize the structures of comp as these external consultants. And you do these consulting engagements, and then you have to pass off the ideas to another team internally that's going to do the administration.
Mm-hmm.
And so the real problem is the fact that strategy and the way that we think about analyzing our data to drive strategic decisions is done in completely different tools. It's done by different teams and different people and different vendors than the execution of comp. And so it's no surprise that there's a gap, not only that creates payout issues and administration issues, but also there's a gap in how quickly we can react to change. And so I think the real problem is the fact that in every part of our life, incentives drive behavior using data in a much quicker way. And yet in sales compensation, we design a comp plan once every 2 to 3 years, and then we ride it out until it starts to fail. And it's mind-boggling.
That's interesting. In being .ai, is there currently, and maybe there is in the future if there's not now, but is there currently an AI aspect to your software? And more specifically, does your software maybe see or learn like optimizations of comp plans and spit out different ideas? Like, what does that look like? Or is it just we come up with it, we throw it in there, and it manages it well for us?
No, that's the exact premise. It's that we are leveraging the collective data model. So every customer and all of the learnings that our platform gets of how incentives are actually driving behavior are then applied to help optimize every customer's individual unique needs for compensation.
So that's interesting because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I see this model then is that, let's say you've got salespeople from an organization are entered in, right, day one. and here's their comp plan. And then I'm sure it has a calculation, of course, of how well they've done. And you might even be able to put in some costs in there, I imagine, so you can understand the net benefit to the company. And then it tracks basically how well the salespeople are doing with that comp, and then across the whole network, right? So does it spit back suggestions like, hey, you may want to raise the base, or you may want to pull down the commission, or you may want to add a tier level? Like, does it give suggestions at this point to the user?
Exactly.
That's
So
so cool. Okay.
the way to think about it is, in today's world, most comp plans are designed based off of the experience of that sales leader, kind of what they've seen work in the past across the different organizations. And they bring it with them to their new organization. They kind of bring their insights. They create this comp plan. But the question is how much of that comp plan is driven by data? And whether that tranche should be at the 65% attainment rate or at the 75%. Why do we, what's the guess? It's either the guesswork by the sales leader or a finance analyst internally doing a one-off ad hoc analysis. Mm-hmm. We're saying, if you understand and build the science of how incentives drive behavior in sales, you can actually start to optimize this using proper data and proper science.
It's funny. So far, every question I've asked, it's been a yes. I feel like people think that like we prepared these. We did not. It's just, every question I ask, if it does that, it's because like this is something that I would have wished that I had or was a part of, when I was at organizations before. So okay, so far we're 3 for 3 here on my wish list in question format. So okay, what about if a company goes in? What about the onboarding part? Does it already have enough data where if I tell it the type of company I am, does it already say, hey, these are the optimal compensation plans for, like, because then I have a marketing agency, right? So that's a very different compensation than, let's say, someone who's doing maybe warehouse style in-person or physical product sales, because there's less overhead, or there's more overhead, less net. So it's going to change, obviously, what you want to pay people. So does it already have industry specific ones to kind of get you started? I mean, if you're just like, I have no idea how to comp people, like can they start with your software to give them those initial ideas based on industry?
So there's a difference between best practices versus leveraging a data model like ours. And why I say that is, jumping in, you can apply best practices to, say, you're a marketing agency or you're in the CPG space. And, yes, there are best practices to apply to each. But the thing with compensation is it's so curated for every business's needs, right? Because even within the same domain, you win deals because you have a differentiation against your competition. And you win deals in this ICP when the requirements for the product look like X, Y, and Z. So your comp plan, even if it's the same, you're talking about within a subset of an industry at the most niche level, your comp plans should look different because you're driving a different outcome and a different behavior in a very nuanced business. Mm-hmm. And so when we're onboarding our customers, you're onboarding them into our data model, our approach, and there is some initial insights. Sure. But the insights grow over time because we're actually starting to, in fact, again, if you think about any sort of AI platform, the models evolve with the data. And yes, there are learnings that can be applied from the aggregate that can help, but the real benefit comes in when it's starting to optimize over time within the organization.
All right, so we'll come back to more features here later. I want to know next, what was your motivation for starting this company? I mean, were you a frustrated salesperson who kept getting screwed on your commissions and they were always wrong, and you're like, there must be change? Like, what's the origin story here?
Yeah, no. So, I mean, I guess I to go way back, I guess incentives have always been maybe a part of my life. When I was in grade 5, I used to have a newspaper rep, and the newspaper at the time came out with a spiff where you got an extra $15 for signing on new customers. Sure. And the first thing I did was I called the newspaper and I said, well, how long do they have to be signed up for? And they said 2 weeks. And I knew that it would cost me $7 to cover the cost of 2 weeks. And so I literally went door to door, just basically saying, would you like to sign up for a new newspaper? I'll cover the first 2 weeks, and if you don't want it after, I'll cancel it. And I ended up signing up, and of course, most people ended up staying on because for $7 every 2 weeks, you end up staying on. And so what was interesting to me is this, how quickly, and as such a young kid, like incentives can have a really meaningful impact. And so when I started my management consulting career and helping large organizations design and tailor their incentive structures, there's 2 things that stood out to me. One is that most organizations were not really taking a data-driven approach. Even when they hired consultants, you're not going to be able to afford to pay thousands of analysts to do an individual like rep by rep analysis. You're not going to do that. So you're going to hire a team of maybe 10 external consultants to come in and kind of help you design what a one size fits all type sales approach for comp plans.
Sure, yeah.
There's organizations out there with 10,000 reps and their plans look the same across the board, whether you're in the middle of Nebraska or New York City or another country. Like it doesn't make sense. And so I saw that and I understood the limitations, but where it really started to feel painful was we'd go in, we'd make these recommendations. And then I've also got to experience the side of being a consultant that's helping implement some of the existing tools in the space. And I implemented these tools and saw the pains of the organizations having to live with them because they're so rigid and they're so focused on administration that you have to do everything in series. You have to do the strategy first. Once you come up with the right plan, then you go onto the tool to implement the administration. So now, not naturally, organizations are starting to plan design 4 to 6 months before the end of the fiscal year. Not great. Yeah. 2, once you come up with the plan, most of the times you didn't have the ability to actually execute properly on that administration, and then all the inefficiencies and all the pains that the sales team had to go through. And at the end of the day, it's a human problem. On the internal side, the finance team is scrambling and running as fast as they can to try to support the business because they want to motivate the sales team. They want to drive the behavior. And then on the sales team side, I mean, most of the times reps don't even have a full understanding of what their plan is meant to drive. So how is it supposed to motivate them? And then there's no confidence in the pay being right because of all the symptoms of again, this really disjointed process. And so coming out of consulting, I had the opportunity where one of the customers I'd worked with was really experiencing a lot of pains, and they had reached out to me to come in and support. And this was my opportunity to really share the vision that I had of the future of sales comp. And they were as strong of a believer in the vision as I was. And so that's where the business kicked off with our first customer.
Do you see more companies signing on now because of COVID with staff going more remote? Do you see compensation plans changing based on the remote factor of a lot of their employees?
So I'd say change is happening in 2 ways. One is that, naturally the sales team, especially if they were an inside sales team where there's kind of a bullpen feel, you naturally now are having to create other ways of incentivizing, kind of creating a team atmosphere. And so some organizations have leveraged spiffs to kind of drive and change and to create a kind of a team atmosphere, even though they're all remote and they're working separately. But I think the biggest area where we're seeing a big change is you have to now pay for your top talent because it's no longer geo-based, right? If you're an amazing rep and you can help customers problem solve and implement the right solutions, you're valuable, and organizations now across the globe see that. And so to retain your top talent, you need to make sure you're designing a comp plan that truly rewards the top performers. And so naturally you're seeing organizations really try to button up their process so they can be confident over rewarding.
Got it. Okay. Now, I'm a marketing guy, so I always ask this question. What are you guys doing to get the word out? I mean, you're on the podcast, so that, okay, PR check. What else though? I mean, do you guys do paid ads? Are you doing email marketing, LinkedIn? Like, what are some things you've done, and have they worked and have they not worked? I mean, a lot of people listening are probably might be in the same spot as you, so it could be useful info.
Yeah. So I think we've had a relentless focus on customer execution. And so we're tackling this in a completely different way than anyone else is, right? We're saying sales compensation is actually a lever for revenue growth. And it's not just an administrative problem. And it's not just a strategic problem over here with the consultants. It's actually a single problem of being a very large lever for growth within an organization. So the only way to demonstrate that is by actually seeing customers that have leveraged the platform year over year to grow their business and improve the outcome of sales comp. And that's been one of our biggest drivers, is focusing on customer execution to the point where, for us, every one of our customers is a satisfied customer that's seeing their sales compensation progress. And so, yes, I mean, a lot of the channels that you mentioned are ways that we are, we're obviously looking to get our company out there and to share the successes we've had to help other organizations. But I ultimately feel, our biggest focus area is our customer success.
That's awesome. Okay. And then let's talk about your favorite features, right? So what are some of the favorite features of of your software that you think, or at least the most popular ones, like that people are like, oh, wow, it can do that. That's amazing. Like, what are the top two or three?
At the core, automating commission processing, and being able to calculate is a requirement that everyone just immediately sees. And it's a check.
Yeah.
But I think the features that really kind of go above and beyond and really wow is the ability to tailor the communication and the nudges and the dashboards to the individual and the plans that they're on. And so really, again, driving that behavior, it's kind of the visualizations and the nudging that the platform does to each individual on a comp plan. I mean, maybe just to step back, if you think about it, we're all wearing, whether we wear an Apple Watch, I notice you're not wearing one right now, but, we're all living in a world where we're constantly getting nudged and driven to be, to get to that next step with individualized data. And I think that's one, that's a surprise where we're able to leverage an individualized viewpoint to nudge and drive behaviors.
And I imagine that it integrates into the more popular payroll systems or financial management systems, right? Is it like QuickBooks, Gusto, things like that? Does it have those kind of native integrations or APIs?
So on the input side, yes, of course, you have to ingest data from, again, CRMs, ERPs, the financial systems. And then on the output, we're typically connecting into a HR system. Mm-hmm. We're more enterprise focused. So typically we're working with, with tools like a Workday or, again, other types of, whether it's ADP, but on both sides is integrations, data ingestion and data outputs.
Got it. Okay. All right. So future of biz tech, that's the title. So we got to talk about the future. All right. So first question is this: where do you see the industry? So you and your competitors, right? Where do you see this going in that 5 to 10 year span? Do you see, AI hitting into a certain area? Do you see, I don't know, compliance or legislation affecting it? Like, what's that 5 or 10 year vision where you think you and all your competitors might have to deal with, or where you'll be going? The evolution, I should say.
Yeah. So I would say if you look at across, processes that impact sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's even the like product itself, all the way to sales process, the decision time to decision has been declining across the board, right? If you think about marketing 20, 30 years ago, how long it took to redesign strategy and execute against strategy, months, not days or seconds. And now we're able to leverage data using, from a marketing automation perspective, to tailor messages to the individual that we're targeting. And so to me, I think sales comp as a whole needs to reduce its time to decision, because it needs to react as quickly as every other part of the sales process. Otherwise, it's actually the laggard and holding the organization back. And so one of the things I think it's going to be a demand from customers going forward is the agility and the speed at which they can execute with the tools that are coming about.
Okay. And then second part of the question then, now where is Forma going? And let's talk about the roadmap a little bit here. My audience likes the inside scoop. So give me something juicy. What do you have coming? What's going to be the cool next thing that you're really excited to launch, even if it's not out yet?
So you kind of alluded to it a little bit, where imagine, coming in and being able to be a new customer and enter some key parameters and kind of get an insight as to what a good comp plan would be. And so one of the things that we've been working towards, and again, it's soon is a relative term, so I'm going to say I can't give you an exact timing, but in effect, being able to take a snapshot of an organization's data, run it through our data models to kind of give back some quick insights and recommendations based off the collective. Again, it's not the truly tailored, individualized comp plan recommendation, but at a high level, recommending based off of our collective data that we've processed so far.
Because a lot of people just need that blank page first word start. You know what I mean? They're like, I don't know, because remember, there's a lot of CEO-led sales, right? Until you get to a certain point where you can really hand it off. And so I know that some companies struggle even deciding, okay, well, but what do I even offer, right? Like, I don't even know what to offer to put out on the internet, for a job posting, right? And that's a big deal. Like, what are they responding to? So I think that's really cool that you have that coming. And so you have to give us an update when it hits. All right. So next question, Nabeil, what, if you had to recommend any book to the audience, just one of your favorite ones, whether it be a classic or something more niche that either inspired you, that's a must read for the audience, what would it be for you?
Yeah. I mean, as a founder, I feel like Crossing the Chasm would be a must read. In my opinion, it kind of set the foundation for me to understand not only the stakeholders that I'd be selling to at the beginning of the business, but as the business scales up and kind of evolves, what that looks like. And for me, it was very clear early on the early customers that you take on, especially being an enterprise, SaaS platform, you're bringing on individuals that are going to help steer and shape the product as much as as much as help you grow the business. And so it's an absolute great read. But again, one of many, I'm sure. But
no, that's a good one. That's a good one. All right. So last question then. What's the best piece of advice business-wise you've ever been given?
This is one that I've heard recently, and it kind of stuck with me as being a very, very a great piece of advice. Is leave no catastrophe unutilized. I'm not going.
Oh, what was it? A good like catastrophe go to waste or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that was like Winston Churchill, if I'm not mistaken. It's a political term. I remember it's like never let a good catastrophe or something like that go to waste, right? Like you can always and it starts with politics, which probably isn't the best medium for it. But I see what you're saying though, in that sense of, yeah, like if something goes wrong, like, okay, we'll learn from it, build a new process, or create something that helps everyone with it. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, and again, it's not like things have to blow up to the extreme, to the literal term catastrophe. But I think, what stuck with me is the premise of building a business and solving a complex problem like this is that you are going to make mistakes, and it's how quickly you can react. And ultimately, mistakes are areas that not only I can learn from as CEO and founder of the company, but everyone in the organization can learn from. And so it's just learning from every single one and carrying that forward.
Yeah. Now that I do like that quote. Like I said, I've heard it before, and it's a good piece of advice. So how can people reach you personally or the company if they're interested in the service or maybe kind of high level deals with you?
Absolutely. I'm always, always open to dive in and chat sales comp and sales strategy. So LinkedIn is probably one of the best ways to get a hold of me personally. But check out Forma.ai or Forma on LinkedIn, and please reach out if you're interested in talking about sales compensation.
Thank you so much. For everyone listening out there, again, if you liked what you heard today, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, give it that 5-star rating, put some cool comments in there. That always helps the algorithms. So other techies like us can find it and enjoy learning about all these amazing and helpful B2B softwares on the market today. Nabeil, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm probably going to talk to you a little bit after this podcast because I have some more questions additional, but because I'm selfish like that, I'm going to keep some of this to myself. I want to check out some more of the Forma.
No, well, thank you for having me on, Jason. It's been an absolute pleasure.
All right, sir. Good to talk to you. Bye-bye.